Well, cheers to live events. We are glad that you are here with us. There are always so many projects that come up, and I think, oh, I want to make one of these. I want to make something of this. But there's only so many days in a week and only so many weeks in a year. So we are bringing you the layered star trivet. And if it seems a little familiar, maybe you've seen it before, but we have a lot of new people with National Quilter Circle and throughout the platform. So it's so nice to be able to present a really fun project that takes a little bit of a break from all that exact piecing that we as quilters tend to overthink and get a little stressed out about. So we're kind of doing a retro project too, because I remember creating something similar to this back in the 80s, I believe. I was in 4-H back in those days, and I remember doing a technique on this order and having a lot of fun with it because you get to play with different fabrics and create a really dynamic design when you're done, something that really pops out at you, and you don't have to do any exact piecing. So we are glad that you're watching. We are really, really glad that you found us at our website or on our platform so that you can then join in. Let us know where you're watching from. We have Becca who says hello from Ohio. Joanna says hello from Brazil. We love to have our international quilters with us too. Catherine says, love the haircut. Oh yeah, it was time for a spring cut because for some reason in Iowa, in the Midwest, we should still have some snow on the ground, but we've been in the 70s. But then, of course, we've turned around and got slammed back to 30 or 40 once in a while, too. So it's still spring, but it's time for a haircut. So it was time to take it up and have a little fun here, too. Who wants to spend time fixing their hair when they've got quilting to do? And Christine says, thank you so much for the free pattern. We are always bringing you fun, free patterns. So remember that if you've watched a video in the past and you don't remember the name of something, you're like, oh, I didn't download that. Everything lives within our platform. You can always sign into our website and look for the free pattern tab, and you can find all kinds of things there. Then you may also get intrigued about the other things we offer and want to pick up a membership so that you can take some more in-depth classes and courses that have a lot more content to them. We bring the easy stuff, but if you're ready for that intermediate step, let us know because we're right there supporting you. You can watch those videos over and over again. So remember that that's available to you too. And let's see, Catherine says hello from Minnesota. We've got Kathy from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Well, those Midwesterners are out in good form today. Lynn says hello from Washington State. We've got a West Coaster, good deal. And then Karen says hello from Ontario, Canada. There's our Canadian. We always have a lot of Canadian quilters. We are so glad you're here. So the layered star trivet, or it could be a candle mat, it could be a hot pad. You can make it into anything you really want. You could flip it over and use this to put your hair straightener on as a great protection against the heat, against your countertop. There's a lot of ways you could use this. So this project, your downloadable pattern is always going to be out there. The link will always be in, and there's the QR code. My handy assistant behind the screen and behind the scenes is putting up the link for you. So if you want to just take a simple, put your camera up in front of it, it'll grab that QR code, take you right to the site, or you can download later if you so choose and you're just having fun watching. We've got Jane saying hello from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. I've learned to sew from open zippers for my open zippers for my teacher that made wedding attire. I've made wedding attire. That's a lot of work and that's a lot of stress. Quilting is a lot more fun. I can totally attest to that because I've made my share of, I made a wedding dress. I have made countless bridesmaids dresses. I have altered many a bridesmaid's dress or a homecoming or a prom dress. Those are work. This is a lot more fun. We've got, let's see, Bridget from France. It's afternoon there. We are glad that you're spending a little bit of your afternoon with us. And we have Charla, I believe, She is from Missouri, or Missouri, because I lived in that southern border county of Iowa. I know it's Missouri. And then we have Bernadette, who is from New York. Wow, you guys are coming in from everywhere today. And then we have Anita, who's watching from Florida. That is fabulous. We love that we have pretty much covered the entire United States border to border and gotten outside of the country. So the layered star trivet, it's going to take 4 fabrics, okay? If you wanted to repeat a fabric within, just think about the spacing. You can see that I used in the St. Patrick's Day version that I've got a solid or a muted green or a marbled green, get the right word, a marbled green in the center, a solid black. And then I went more dynamic and went light. And this is really a tiny little stripe that has a little design in it. And then I couldn't pass up the St. Patrick's Day fabric when I was shopping, and I didn't know what I was going to be making. So literally, this is the piece that I have left. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, when you are a quilter, always buy extra, because it didn't quite have enough to do a full backing on this. So I had to ad lib and add a little of a solid or muted or marbled green on the side in order to make the back, because I just love this fabric so much. It was so cute. So always remember, add a little extra when you're buying. But with 4 fabrics, you can make a really fun project like this. And this could be a really great stocking stuffers at Christmas time too. You could go ahead and start working on those projects, maybe for your quilt guild or your quilt friends, or just family members to stuff in their stocking at Christmas. So we are going to get started with the yardages. Now, the pattern, I didn't go back and revisit again because the original, or the one I wrote it with, was the red and black and white. Now, there's enough room down the side that you can plug in the colors that you select. It really helps if you stay organized by listing them, so you remember, this is what I planned for the center, this is what I planned for round 2, 3, 4, all, or 1, 2, 3 out. From the center, 1, 2, 3 outward. And then it'll kind of help you stay organized. So just remember, make some notes, write down what you're going to use, or maybe even use a something that you can iron away later if you use one of those friction pens. So you can write alongside of it, and then you can iron it off and use it again to note what color you made. So I even did that with my own. So as I was cutting pieces to demo for you, so that I would remember where all my colors place out. We've got Robin saying hello from Coatesville, Pennsylvania, and Corinne from Raleigh, North Carolina. We're adding pieces to the map. Okay, let's go ahead and get started on the cutting, because as I was looking at this, I actually only told you to get a 1/4 yard of fabric for each of the pieces for the different shapes out. And you're going to look at it and say the math is a little bit close, and I can't get maybe the 8th piece cut, because you're going to cut 5.5-inch squares. And I'm going to show you a way to cheat if you didn't buy extra fabric. Okay, so either buy extra fabric because you know you love the print that you're picking out, or here is the cheat. I went ahead and cut my 5.5-inch strip with the fabric of my, I'm going to use this little shamrock print as the demo outer edge. And I can cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. When I get to the 8th, I have a rectangle left. I don't have a square left. But guess what? Because it's very close, and some of this fabric is going to be on the inside of the project, we're going to take each of the squares, no matter what size, from the center all the way out. We're going to take each of the squares. We're going to fold them in half, wrong sides together. So we have print on the outside, making a rectangle. Then we're going to press them, that they look a little like a prairie point. If you've done prairie points, if you're new to quilting, here's a whole nother term. We are folding the corners down to make a triangle like this. And we're going to have a fold right down that center as they come together and kiss together. Now, that means that everything underneath is covered up. And if you were short just a little bit of fabric and you didn't want to buy more, some of us are working off fabric we already have, and we just have a strip left and we want to use it up, guess what? Figure out where half should be, fold it down, then fold in the corners, and voila, nobody knows what's on the inside. Okay, so there are tricks to everything. We can get by with using that one width of fabric, and then we can sneak that last one out of that strip to get the 8 pieces that we need, okay? Sharon says, good morning from Southern Illinois. Are going to do a block a week again. Well, we have some things planned. I don't know if I'm supposed to reveal all of that yet, but we do have a project coming up in April. So everyone hold on. I don't know if it's been put out into the universe. I'm starting it right now, but there is a project coming up that we will meet a series of weeks and put together a quilt project. So the answer that you have for you, Sharon, is yes, there is something coming up. It hasn't been revealed yet, so you're hearing it first. You've drawn it out of me. She says, I finally finished 2 from you, and they are going to an orphanage in Mississippi. Now, isn't that just like a quilter to make a quilt and give it away? We are so glad. That's how quilters are. They love to make stuff and give it away. So coming up, we will have some, we always have more. There's not enough hours of days in a week, like I said. So Robin says, I'm loving the runner on your chair. Is it a different video? Yes, it is. I brought it up because it's another St. Patty's Day kind of themed project. And it's called Shamrock. I got to think about it. Shamrock Shenanigans, I think. And I'll let our moderator underneath here see if he can find the link to the Shamrock Shenanigans table runner from, I think, last year. But like I said, everything lives under the free patterns tab, so you can find all of the patterns out there. Okay. In the pattern that we're working on today, it tells you to go through and cut all of your fabrics, right, into squares. The very center ones are cut smaller. Those are 3.5, and you only need 5 of those for the center. 5 seems odd, but we'll get to that in a minute. Then the next fabric that I'm going to use in this one is the plaid, and those are cut 4.5, again, pressed in half and then into this fun little triangle. The last 2 groups are cut at 5.5. So you could do the sneaky little thing if you have 1 strip left on fabric, round 2 also, to get all of 8 pieces that you need. So once you get them all cut and pressed, that's going to be the biggest part of this project, is the pressing, to try and stay as accurate as you can as you press these into this bunch of triangles. The big tip here, I think, really is that, let's take one that's a full square here, is to really make sure that you match up your cut edges when you're folding them. And then as you draw these down, making sure that you, again, keep your your cut edges so they're one on top of the other, like stacked. Okay? That way you know that this is a very accurate triangle when you're done. As you're working, if you need to create a little bit of steam to get these pressed nice and flat, a little mist or a tiny bit of steam on your iron. You don't want to over steam anything. You want to distort things, but a little bit will help get a nice flat project pieces. And the other trick that I found was, as soon as I pressed it, now I'm pressing so that the little wings are going to the center, right? As soon as I pressed it and moved my iron away, I would flip it over and let it rest. And the weight of it kind of kept everything more flat. When I was done, when I went to pick them up, they stayed nice and flat like that. So, little tip, flip them over to cool, like a pancake. Okay, Lisa says, good morning. Always wanted to do this pattern. See, we're catching the people who maybe haven't done it before. And then Max found the link to the other. I'll put the link in the chat. So if you want the link for Shamrock Shenanigans, that is in the link in the chat there, so that you can find it and download it later. Okay, then the last thing you're going to need is binding for the outer edge. Now, here's where if you have never done bias binding before, this is where you need to cut bias binding. Your binding will have to have enough stretch and give to gently go around a circle. You could add pieces to square this off if you don't want to do a round. That's fine. But I'm trying to challenge you to try something new. So cutting bias binding is going to be our last thing at the very end, because straight up grain binding will not work on a rounded edge like this. So maybe this is your first venture into bias binding, okay? We are going to go ahead and get started. The other things that you're going to be cutting, you will need a base fabric, a 12-inch square of something that you can see lines on. As I was laying in bed thinking about, well, why did I always pick a light fabric for the base instead of one of the fabrics in the project? I think the main reason is I need to be able to see some registration lines on this. So I've always picked a lighter fabric that I can easily mark on, because aligning the pieces is what gets the design. Okay, so darker fabrics are just harder to see the line on, and I don't need any challenges in the vision department. So nice light fabric that you can see your registration marks that we're going to make later. You're going to need 2 layers of batting, and I tend to use cotton batting, 2 layers of that. But the other thing you can use is Insulbright. It's a product made by the Warm Company. It is made for heat reflectivity, and I think if I hold it up to the camera, you can see just a little bit of a shimmer. There's a metallic layer in this that reflects heat, so it is great for using for hot pads and trivets and things where you need that heat to kind of bounce back and not toward your hand. And this is a product you can use. I have used just 1 layer before, but because it's always kind of a distance for me to get from my oven to wherever I'm going to set my item down at that's hot, I tend to put either, if I use 1 layer of the Insulbright, which is the name of the product, Insulbright, with 1 layer of cotton batting. So team those up, you get a little bit more lift, a little more insulation layer, or go to your scrap bin, pull out those pieces that you've trimmed off of quilts. And if I hold this up, I don't know if you can catch it, but there's a seam right down the center. I just butted pieces up and zigzagged them together so that I didn't waste any batting, because we always have these pieces left. And I hate to throw any product away. And since both of these have seams in them, I can offset my seam, one going this way, the other going across, and sandwich those together to use in this project so I don't waste. And then you're going to need a 12-inch piece of backing fabric so that you have the backside to your project. Usually I list the backing fabric separately in your patterns, because everybody has their own desire of what they want to show off on the back. Maybe you want more fabric from the front to use as the back. Sometimes you're going to use a scrap of something you already have. So it tells you approximately how much you need to do that. Lisa says, oh, no, sorry. I already got to Lisa. Just double checking to make sure we don't lose anybody. Okay, let's get started putting all of our triangles for our fun trivet together. And the first thing you're going to do is take your 12-inch square. And you can do this with just pressing, or you can take out a ruler and find the center. It's totally up to you how you go about doing that. You can even just score the fabric if it has enough body to it so that you can find the center one direction and the other. It kind of feels like making a paper snowflake, but I'm just going to score this with my fingers. My iron was not hot. Forgot to hit the button to turn it on. And then we're going to fold the other direction. We're going to do diagonals. And that means kind of being gentle. We don't want to distort that bias edge. That's where the stretch is at. I'm just lightly scoring along so that I can see where the diagonal on my 12-inch square is in both directions. So kind of like origami. It's all about finding the angles so that we can line up our pieces and get them spaced properly. Now, I have a ridge going down the center, across this direction, and then both directions, if I need those to be more visible so that it's easier to align my pieces. Because as you work on this, those folds kind of fade out, you are welcome to go in with a fabric marking tool and mark all of those angles. And I will mark those just so that it's more visible for you. Everybody has a different comfort zone. Everybody's eyes are a different age, and whether or not you can see that fold, totally your decision on whether or not it's bright enough for you. You could also use the ruler to find that center, nice, lined up. Now I have all of those marked. So if you'd rather not do the folding part, just do the marking. Find half, 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 and half. Half can mean a lot of different things. Now that we have our hash marks on there, we know where we're starting. We're going to take the fabrics that belong in the very center. And I also have a fabric glue stick. You can use a kid's school glue glue stick also. Those work just fine. And we're taking that one of those 5 that are for the center. And at this point, you really don't need to do any folding on it. I was just thinking, do I need to fold it? But I have enough registration points that I can match this up and still get this centered. Because as I lay my square on there, I'm looking for my corner or my corners to end up on the diagonals. That way I know I have it centered. And I'm going to take a fabric glue stick and I am going to just lightly secure it because I'm going to move this around a bit later and I don't want it to slip out of place. So now that is positioned. Now we're taking the first 4 of our fabrics, the center piece, and we're going to place these with the folded edges upward instead of down. The thought is that you will need that area for stitching where those pieces fold together. You're going to use that kind of stitching in the ditch kind of thing to hold all of your layers together later. So place these with the fold portion upward. And we're going to put all of the little noses of the triangles toward the center. So all the raw edges are going to match up with that first square that we put on to our background. Now, here is where the glue stick or pins, whichever is your preference, is going to come in quite handy because I'm going to glue these little guys down temporarily. The fabric glue is kind of the best to use because it doesn't gum up sewing machine needles later when you're going to stitch through things, and it's water soluble, it's easily removed, doesn't leave any marks or stains behind. And yes, I have used simple kids glue stick. I have one upstairs. This one I just happen to have handy down here. It leaves a little less, a little narrower line of glue instead of a really wide stripe. But we are adding those first 4 pieces. And I'm going to put a couple of pins in just to hold the layers. And then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. And I'm going to stitch that first round close to the outer edge. Now, if you don't want to stitch this layer, you can just simply have it pinned or glued, depending on how well yours adheres. But I have had a little better luck with doing a really quick baste close to that outer edge to secure. You want it really close to the outer edge, like an 1/8 of an inch. Don't go in too far because we don't want anything to show later on the finished project. Okay. Let's see. Linda asks, can you use the roller to make the folds? Yes, you can. If you have a wooden iron or a roller, they look like a tiny little rolling pin on a handle that you can easily roll those creases to. Just make sure that you try to get them as flat as possible so that it doesn't, when they buckle up towards you, it's kind of annoying. So if your roller will yield you a nice finished project piece, go for it. Otherwise, take them to the iron and do them there. Okay, we're going to stitch this outer edge, and then we're going to work on how to place the next row. And then the sequence after that stays the same as we work our way out, making the layered star. Okay, A little pivot at the corner. You could even use a longer stitch length than your normal piecing. My normal piecing on my machine is a 2.0, and I could take it up to a 2.5 or a 3. This is just basting to hold it in place, so it does not need to be super tight. It's not the same as piecing. So here we go around the third edge, and then as I get to the corner, I'm leaving the needle down so I can easily pivot to the next side. And as those 4 pieces come together, they should butt right up against each other, kind of nice and tight, so that not much of the fabric underneath shows, but if it does, it matches. That's why that 5th square underneath there is the matching fabric, just in case anything kind of shows through the fold there. So that's why using the 5th square is really great. Now we're going to build off of that. This is the center. We're going to go to round 1, and then we're going to work straight. Whoop, this one isn't very folded nicely. You can see how it has a blunted tip. That's time to go back in and do just a little bit of an adjustment. You want to make sure you get those folded with a tip that is about as pointy as you possibly can, because they'll fit together nicely. We're working on dividing up the angles, and the math is going to be true if these are nice and sharp at an angle. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in top and bottom, side to side first. I'm going to just lay them in place, and then we're going to go back and we're going to measure. So in the instructions, it will tell you, I'm trying to remember exactly the spacing I put between pieces. You can adjust this if you like. You can use a wider spacing, or you can have a narrower. This is about as wide as you can go, because as one overlaps another, it covers the fabric underneath. This is a 3/4 inch spacing between pieces. And by 3/4 inch, I mean from tip to tip, it's 3/4 of an inch. So that's where, if you're coming from quilting, from the old garment sewing, well, good garment sewing era or world, a seam gauge like this, so that it has a slide. You can adjust the slide to the 3/4 inch mark and use that from tip to tip to get your 3/4. Or you can just go to a ruler, just make sure it's accurate. 3/4 inch is what we're looking for from tip to tip. So as I place my pieces, I'm also looking that the fold, as this fold lays down, that it aligns with one of the registration marks going out from the center. That's why the lines are there, so that we don't get shifted off to one side, okay? Or end up wobbly, okay? So we want to make sure that we're 3/4 of an inch out from the center, from one row to the next, and the center is aligned on a registration mark. 3/4 there, and to the registration mark, 3/4 from the tip to tip, out to the registration line, and do that on all 4 sides. Once you have those in place, we're going to add the next 4, because we've only put 4 on right now. Everything's just laying in place. And I may want to go back and do glue stick underneath this, totally up to you. The next layer is going to be the corners. And we have registration lines going out to the corners. So the same thing, that fold of the fabric is going to go along that registration line. And we're going to measure again 3/4 of an inch out, tip to tip, from the very center to the tip of the piece we just added. Also noting that registration line. If I can get this one aligned, get that registration mark, then the next, and basically it's just working your way around the center so that you have everything lined up. Now I'm going to pin this so that I can pick it up and show it to you closer. I realize that we are not in close-up shot here. during our lives. So we are gonna just get a quick bunch of pins in here. And yes, there's a lot of layers. That's why sometimes glue stick is very helpful. Trying not to shift those pieces too much because I want to be able to point it out to you here in a second that things are aligned. And I don't want to pick it up and have it all shift out of place because we're going to progress in the same method from this round through the next two. So let's find my design board here so I can pick it up. Okay, as I put this up, now you can see that a star starts to appear in the very center, a dark green star. A little messy because of the plaid fabric, but I just couldn't resist using the plaid. But a 3/4 inch from the center towards each of the tips of the 8 triangles we just added. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to baste out here in a fun shape all the way around so that I keep all of those pieces in place. And then once that row is added, I'm going to do the exact same thing again. We're going to do top and bottom. Whoops, I need my fold up. Top and bottom, side to side. And the reasoning for the same patterning is just kind of an accuracy in the way the folds. It kind of gives a unity or harmony to the design if we always add top, bottom, side, side. Then corners. There we go. And now I've approximated these. I don't have an absolute, I have one extra for some reason. Okay. We have those in place. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to measure. You're going to double check your registration line out to the edge. And then you're going to do the same thing again. Top, bottom, side to side. Then your corners and your layered star trivet will have come to life. And that base fabric is what's holding all of it together. There, now you can see that brighter green pop out in the design. There we go. I hate to hold it too far up there. I might have everything slide off. But once you have that assembled and you've basted each layer as you go, then it's time to go back and do the stitch. Like I said, the reason why we have those folds coming together is that we're going to stitch in the ditch, basically through the center, through the center, through the center, through the center, so that each of the pieces is held in place with a stitching. Now that gets to be a little bit of a challenge, I realize, but as you work your way through, you can open that those folds up just a tiny bit to drop a line of stitching down through there. Just go slow. This is no race to get all the layers put together there. Now, I hadn't put the batting, anything on the back yet. I just stitched down through that. If you would like to do all the layers to quilt down through, I think this one, yes, this one is pie quilted on the back. So I went ahead and put my pieced or layered top, battings, backing, and stitched through that. Quilter's choice if you'd like to do the quilting at the same time. And then once the entire thing was quilted, that's when I went back and did the measurement for making the circle portion. So basically, this is going to be measure out from the center 4 7/8. So basically, you're taking your ruler, measuring out from the center, making a mark, and you're working your way all the way around to make the circle, marking it on the outer edge. Wherever you mark it at, then I went back and I stitched the layers so that I secured the curve of my circle, and then I trimmed away the excess fabric. So now they have a perfect circle. Now, when it comes to the bias binding, that's probably the fun part. let's see, real quick. Linda asks, are you using a steam iron? I tend not to use steam. I live in an area of the country that has very, very hard water. Even though we have a water softener, I have killed a lot of irons. So I got away from using steam in my iron, and I tend to use a mist bottle. So straight water or Best Press is my other best friend for adding a little moisture or sizing to my fabric or spray starch. So I tend to use a dry iron just because I have ruined countless irons and was really tired of buying new ones. So a dry iron for me has been the ticket. For other people, they're good about buying distilled water to put in their iron so that the lime buildup doesn't destroy the inside workings of the iron. More power to you. I am really not good at doing that. So bias binding on the outer edge. Now, let me show you what I have a piece of, let's see, let me cut this so there's no selvage edge involved here. I'm going to cut a 4-inch piece of straight of grain binding. These are leftover bindings from projects. A piece of straight of grain binding, and then a 4-inch piece, same length, of, I have 5 there, 4-inch piece of bias binding. This is left over from, of course, my project. When you get into making things, you end up making more than you need. Straight of grain binding has very little stretch. I am pulling on this until my fingernails turn color. There's a little stretch, but not much. I can maybe stretch it 1/8 of an inch. That's about all the stretch I have in straight of grain binding. Same piece, same length of piece, 4 inches. These start out the exact same length. But if I take a piece of bias binding, it has a lot more stretch. And you can see it grew. I can stretch a piece, 4-inch piece, all the way out to 4 7/8. It has a lot of give in it because now the fibers are at an angle, kind of like the legs on a folding chair. And if a folding chair breaks, it has a lot of stretch as you go to the ground, right? So that's why bias binding, something that has give to it, is used on the outer edge, because as you apply the binding to the outer edge, and you're going to apply it to, I applied mine to the front of the project and rolled it to the back. You're going to put this along the edge, and it's going to be ruffled. The folded edge of the binding, we are so used to using straight of grain binding that we don't exactly know what to do when it comes to curves, because this is now raised and loopy along the folded edge. As we put the binding on, this becomes, and it's okay to do that. It's fine for it to be bumpy like that. It should be raised off the surface, because then once it's applied, it has enough give to go over the edge and to the back. And you will find out that when you put it on, it kind of like sucks around the project and lays flat on the backside. Bias binding is so fun to use because usually you're having to hold and turn straight of grain binding. When you put bias binding on a curve and turn it, it just kind of like around the edge of the project and holds itself in place. All you need to do is stitch it in place, down when you're finished. So the bias binding is cut just real quick. We're almost going to be long on time here, but bias binding means that the fabric or the yardage is taken. Let me find a cut edge here and cut at a true angle, 45-degree angle across the fabric. So normally we would cut strips off to make straight of grain binding. On bias binding, we're actually cutting at a 45-degree angle across the fabric to make that binding. So that's why the yardage for binding is a little bit increased, because you need to get strips that are wide, long enough you can put together and join those with a diagonal seam the same way that you normally would join binding for straight of grain, and then your binding will have a give that you need. So yes, you're going to have wasted triangles. I understand that. Those are just scraps that go into an applique or some other project down the line, but you're going to be cutting those 45-degree angle strips off of your yardage, joining them together like you would in normal binding, and applying that bias binding to the outer edge of your project. If we don't have any, let's see, Lisa asks, will the edge of the fabric fray when washed? The edge of the fabric fray when washed. There aren't any raw edges exposed. On a bias cut, you would have less fraying, but I would not want to wash anything that is bias cut because of the washing and drying process would cause stretch and distortion. So if you're going to use the half yard cut, maybe for the binding, I would wash the fabric first and then cut your bias strips. The bias should never be put into the washer and dryer before applied because the distortion will just be outrageous. In the layering process, there are no exposed edges because of all of the folding that's occurred and because of the stitching that you did underneath to hold things in place, that basting around each layer, and the stitching that you did down through the folds in all 4 directions. Remember, down the center like a window pane, and then the 2 diagonals, that holds all of the pieces in place so that you have something that becomes very sturdy and won't come apart when laundered. So I hope that answers all of your questions. We will be back in 2 weeks with another fun project. Thanks for joining me today. Remember, download the Layered Star Trivet if you haven't already. Thanks for joining me.